Welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we are about to go over the shooting of Alex Pretti in Minnesota. Now, the way we do that is we look at the law, we look at the facts, and you get to decide what the correct legal outcome is. Now, first, let's start with the law. So when it comes to police use of force in this context, we start with the seminal case, Graham v. Connor. I don't care what other lawyer you're listening to, whoever else is doing the analysis, if they do not mention this particular case, they absolutely do not know what they're talking about.
Guys, thank you so much for joining me. John Soto, this is SotoCast. We are going to take a look at the Pretti shooting. This is Nate the Lawyer. He's a very prominent YouTube channel. He does a lot of really good analysis. I don't always agree with him, which is a normal thing, right? We don't always have to agree with everybody that we listen to, but I can still have a lot of good takeaways from his discussion. I want to break this down a little bit. The way he breaks it down is, again, clearly from a legal perspective. However, he likes to say that it's not slanted in a particular way, but I think you'll kind of get a little bit of a slant as he's going along and kind of leading you through the case and the actions that we see here in the video. Take a listen to it. I'm gonna bounce around a little bit, interject, and then we're gonna break it down and give you my personal analysis of his analysis. Let me know what you guys think.
This is how all officers' use of force will be judged in a court of law. Now, in this case, the Supreme Court ruled that if an officer is going to use force to subdue a subject, it had to be objectively reasonable. And they defined what objectively reasonable is. Quote, "It's an objective standard used to judge an officer's actions. Under this standard, a particular application of force must be judged through the perspective of a reasonable officer facing the same set of circumstances without the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, and be based upon the totality of the facts that are known to that officer at the time that the force was used." The court then points to three factors to help us determine if the force used was objectively reasonable. The first is, what's the nature of the 911 call? The second is, was the subject resisting arrest? And the third is, was the subject a serious threat to officers or other members of the community? Now, this is not an exhaustive list of factors, but things the court says a reasonable officer would take into account being objectively reasonable. Now, this is very, very important. Officers are allowed to use force under the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution to effectuate a seizure of persons, to arrest someone. So, for instance, an officer's unprovoked punch, push, or any type of physical altercation with a subject that is not in furtherance of them trying to arrest the person, or if they don't have any legal basis to arrest the person, would be considered criminal activity and not objectively reasonable. That's a long way to say officers just can't beat you because they feel like it. They have to use force to effectuate an arrest, and that force has to be objectively reasonable. Here's an example. Let's say we have a woman standing on the street, and an officer walks up to this woman and slaps her in the face. Well, in that case, the officer's just committed an assault. So now it would be on the officer to explain why the assault was necessary to effectuate the arrest of this woman. Now, if the officer had no basis to arrest this person, then the officer loses the legal protections that are afforded to him under the law. And if that's the case, then this incident will be treated as an assault and not an arrest authorized under the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. Now, we're going to move from the law to the facts of the case and try to apply what we've learned to what actually happened that day in Minnesota. So we're going to look at this first camera angle where protesters are exercising their First Amendment right to peacefully protest. They're in the street, blowing whistles and recording ICE activities. Now, it's extremely important to understand they are not blocking the agents from doing their job. They're not standing in front of the vehicle. They're not touching the officers. They are essentially being extremely annoying to the officers.
Now, this is where the spin starts. Being extremely annoying to the officers. Now, from the video that I see, right on the onset, they're in the middle of the street. So now I understand these are federal agents. They can't enforce local laws. However, you know, they are violating a law here. So to just merely say they're just being annoying, right away you can kind of see where he's spinning this and where he's shaping the narrative that he's trying to put forth here. Why, I don't know. You know, he may just be very disgusted with how everything went down, which is fine. He gets a little bit towards the end. But right on the onset, just to say that they are not committing anything or not doing anything wrong or illegal, in my opinion, is false. And again, what people also have to understand is that the impeding of law enforcement doesn't just have to. Your First Amendment, if a law enforcement is trying to effect an arrest, let's take his example and bring it out to the nth degree. If somebody in law enforcement is trying to effect an arrest and you are having a blowhorn to the point where you are drowning out the orders that the officer's giving to the subject that he's arresting, you're impeding in that arrest. If you're not allowing a normal rapport, if I'm telling somebody, please put your hands behind your back, you're being arrested, and somebody is just taking a bullhorn and literally making it so that he cannot hear the instructions that I'm giving him, that person is affecting the arrest that's taking place. They're not allowing the natural process to happen. You can protest all you want, but in that sense, you're actually affecting an arrest. And I think there are good grounds to say that is some type of obstruction. If you're not allowing my voice and my commands to be heard by the person that's being arrested, there's some obstruction going there. and I'm sure plenty of people with better degrees than me, they can litigate that back and forth. However, it is a good point to be made.
Now, this is a very important part of the video because, as you can see, the two women are standing beside the car, but they're not blocking the car. They're not stopping ICE from doing what they're doing. They're just standing in the middle of the street, screaming, yelling, and blowing whistles. And the officer has the door open, so the officer can go sit down and they can drive away, but the officer chooses to engage these two women. Now, this is Alex Pretti. He is the person who's going to die later in this video.
Go.
Now, as you can see, Alex Pretti has his cell phone in his hand and he's recording ICE officers from the middle of the street, also waving by vehicles. Now,
so again, right there, he's in the middle of the street. Say whatever it is you want. There's no city that allows that to happen. There's no city that has no rules or no ordinance or no laws against standing in the middle of the street. Right? Whether you're obstructing vehicular traffic or whatever it is, if you're standing in the middle of the street and a car has to swerve out of the way and hit somebody else, you are committing some sort of violation. Whether it's a violation, whether it's a misdemeanor, that all depends on where you are. But regardless of that fact, every jurisdiction has a rule stating that you, as an individual, cannot stand in the middle of a roadway.
Now, Alex just said, hey, do not push them, because the ICE officer then, for some reason, violently starts pushing these women who are not blocking the ICE vehicle. Let's see it from another angle. So now from this angle, if we zoom in, you can clearly see the officer pushing the woman in the street. Now, the officer then pushes a second woman in a light-colored jacket into the street. Now, again, we can see the officer push the woman in the brown coat again. Remember, they're not blocking the officer. They're not in front of the officer's car. And remember, this officer was about to leave, got out of the car, and started pushing these women. Now, after assaulting these two women, the officer is...
Crucial point. And as soon as I heard that, that's when I knew where he was going with this. As soon as I heard him say that, that's where I knew where he was going with this, right? Because he used very specific, again, he's a lawyer. He knows what he's saying. He knows how he's saying it. He knows what he's trying to accomplish when he's saying it.
Now, after assaulting these two women,
that is a very important statement. So in the state of New York, a push does not constitute an assault. In order for it to be an assault, you have to be experiencing some level of pain and or there has to be an injury. That will constitute a violation in the state of New York and is not arrestable unless in the presence of law enforcement. And even then, it's still only a violation, meaning it's the equivalent of getting a ticket. So where Nate seems to be taking this is that the officer is now assaulting. The officer is now committing a crime, and now he's going to expand upon that. He's building levels of, as somebody who's in a prosecutorial sense, right? And he's doing, he does a really good job of this. Again, I love his channel. I love his work. I think he's a very important voice in the space, but it's also, again, important to pick holes in his argument and try to understand where he's going with it and how to kind of look at it from another direction.
The officer is going to assault the woman in the light-colored jacket again, this time violently pushing her to the ground. Before we even get to the shooting, we have to figure out if this officer's initial use of force was justified under these conditions. Well, let's go back to the law. Graham v. Connor says we have to look at the totality of the circumstances at the time force was used. And the Supreme Court reaffirmed this in Barnes v. Felix in 2025, ruling that an excessive force claim under the Fourth Amendment must be evaluated based on the totality of the circumstances, not solely at the moment an officer perceives a threat. And that's why we're looking at the totality of the circumstances and not just the moment that the deadly physical force was used. So in looking at the totality of the circumstances, when officers initially use force, the officer who initially pushed both women in the street, was that force justified? So now your question should be, Nate, why does this even matter? Well, first I have to take you to 18 U.S.C. section 111. Now this statute protects officers while performing their official duties, but not while they're committing an unjustified battery. Now this statute doesn't give you the right to resist arrest. It gives you the right to self-defense if the officers are using unreasonable force. Now in the Eighth Circuit, The general principle is that a defendant has no right to resist an unlawful arrest. That comes from United States v. Henderson. The Eighth Circuit then followed up in United States v. Milk, claiming that a defendant who is charged with assaulting an officer is entitled to a self-defense jury instruction if there's evidence to support a reasonable belief that the force was necessary to protect oneself from unlawful physical harm or unreasonable force. So therefore, if a federal officer in Minnesota employs force that is objectively unreasonable, creating a risk of serious or unjustifiable bodily harm, that force would constitute an unlawful physical harm. And under those circumstances, the defendant retains the right to use proportionate force to protect themselves from the immediate threat.
Now, he's getting a little bit into the weeds here, so I want to just streamline this a little bit. And I think this kind of messes up one of his points here. He's stating that in the event that somebody is using unjustifiable, right, you can't resist arrest. So one of the issues I have here, and one of the things that we need to find out is, at this point, at this stage of the game, that agent immediately, and again, I understand why these things happen. I understand why this person necessarily maybe doesn't want to arrest them, but just wants to, like, he's obviously frustrated. He got goaded. He got. They got under his skin, right? And you know, you kind of have to, with experience in law enforcement, that stuff kind of goes away, and you just learn to really keep your head in the game, because everyone's still a human being. And after multiple encounters, you start to have enough. You start to get fed up with it. However, you have to keep a level head and understand that once you're going to do that, once you're going to get physical with somebody, it is in effecting an arrest. It is because you are affecting an arrest. You can't just go ahead and push somebody down to the ground and then, you know, walk away. You went hands on. You got to finish the job, and you have to be able to justify your actions for what you have done. What he's saying in this context is that in the event that an officer's like punching a guy in the face and he thinks he did nothing wrong, he just walked out of a store and he's getting punched in the face, he has the right to defend himself, and then that will go to a hearing, even though the guy's going to be arrested, all that stuff. However, he's speaking about the defendant in this particular case. He's speaking about the person that the force is being imputed upon. So if the officer's coming at me and I'm defending myself, that's one thing. That has nothing to do with a third party. A third party, a gang cannot come now and beat the shit out of the cop because they think that his actions against me are unjustified, right? That's totally different. And he's going to kind of meld these things together in this particular incident. Take a listen.
This is distinct from a claim of resisting arrest itself. This is self-defense against unreasonable force. And in United States v. Conley, the Eighth Circuit reinforced that federal assault statutes like 18 U.S.C. Section 111 incorporate a common law defense of justification self-defense. So the bottom line, if the officer is using unlawful and unreasonable force to effectuate an unlawful arrest, then the defendant is allowed to use self-defense to protect himself from that unreasonable force. So now let's apply what we've learned to the facts. So when this officer is violently pushing these women who are not fighting back, is this unreasonable force? And if it is, these women have the right of self-defense. Assault 1. Assault 2. Assault 3. Assault 4. Assault 5.
None of those would be an assault in New York State. I don't know. You know, I have to look up the law, and I can't see how you can have an assault without an injury. I don't see how that would work. But let's continue. So now he's saying that's an assault. Now, if these agents, for whatever reason, are attempting to effect an arrest, granted, listen, I'm not really. I want to do the same thing. I want to look at this as objectively as I can. From what I see here, rather than pushing them, they should be saying either move back, you're in our way, which at that point, maybe you do it once and then you're good. Once you then progress to the point where you are now going after them, you should be attempting to effect an arrest. You should, at that point, something happened. And again, we don't know if whatever happened, we don't know if it happened here. We don't know if it happened prior. I'm going to show you a video in a minute showing something that happened prior to this. We don't know if if he's possibly arresting them for something that happened last week. We have no idea in this scenario. So again, these are assumptions that Nate is making off of this specific video. And I disagree with the assault. I disagree with calling that an assault. Now, if you want to say that doesn't comport and that's not department rules and regulations or whatever, that's one thing. When it comes to an assault, you're saying that this agent is committing a crime. Right? Pushing and shoving, in my view, from where I sit, is not a crime. right? That can result in, a possible crime. Let's say, if she fell and she got, physically injured, okay, then you can talk about that when and if that happens. However, at this point now, I don't see a crime. He sees a crime, and the guy is interjecting himself in what could potentially be an arrest situation, right? So I view this as an arrest situation. I feel like they should have tried to grab the agent should have tried to grab the women and effect the arrest. And now this gentleman is, or whatever you want to call him, he's getting involved and he's impeding the effect of the arrest.
Now, not to hide the ball here, but each one of those assaults are unreasonable uses of force in this particular situation. And just to verify that, here is the Department of Homeland Security use of force policy. Page 2 of the policy.
He's going to use of force policy, which again that's not law, that's policy, right? So again, I like Nate blurring the lines a little bit right here.
Says law enforcement officers, LEOs, may use force only when no reasonable, effective, safe, or feasible alternative appears to exist, and may use only the level of force that is objectively reasonable in light of the facts and circumstances confronting that law enforcement officer at the time force is applied. So, if these two women were just standing there, and a safe and feasible alternative existed, like talking to them, then skipping that step violates the policy. Now, let's look at the facts. You're going to determine if the ICE officer's use of force is objectively reasonable based on a policy, because the policy says you can only use force.
I'm going to speed forward a little bit here just because he gets into the weeds of the policy and stuff like that. And I just want to see what else we got going on.
Two women standing beside the officer's car. They're not blocking it, and they are screaming and yelling at the officer, maybe even blowing whistles. Now, the Supreme Court said this is protected First Amendment speech, so we know they can't use that to arrest the women. And since we need physical aggression toward the
protected First Amendment speech, however, not protected to stand in the middle of the street. So, whether it's a violation or whatever, there is absolutely some type of law being broken in this scenario. And Nate doesn't want to admit to that, but that is, in fact, it may be a local jurisdictional law, and they may not have the ability to enforce that. However, it's being committed in their presence. So there's definitely some gray area right there.
The officer, we don't see any of that. Matter of fact, what we see is the officer show physical aggression toward the women. So since this physical aggression is a requirement for the statute in the 8th Circuit, where this thing happened, and we don't have any physical aggression, then the officers are making what's known as an unlawful arrest. They cannot arrest these women for standing in the street, and they cannot arrest these women for violating 18 U.S.C. Section 11.
And again, he's making this assumption on this video alone. Now, when you're in law enforcement and you understand that, you can totally understand that you can see somebody commit a crime, not get them, and get them later. It happens all the time. So if he wants to say that in this particular video that they had no justification for effecting an arrest from what he could see, he definitely has some ground there, because the rules that they're breaking are local rules. However, he has no idea what these agents have seen in the past. They may have seen them committing crimes in the past, and that may not be displayed for here. They may have warrants for their arrest. We have no idea. As it stands now, they're breaking local law. Does ICE or Homeland Security or whatever have the ability to arrest somebody on local law? Probably not. But it's gray. That's all I'm saying. All I'm saying is the waters are very muddy in this initial situation. They are going to get crystal clear, though, in a few minutes.
Minnesota. So we have police who have...
Guys, if you're still here, please hit the subscribe button. That's all I ask. Just subscribe to the channel. Growing really fast. Pretty awesome. Just subscribe and you're good. Thank you.
Have no lawful authority to make this arrest under 18 U.S.C. Section 111 based on court precedent. We also have the officer using excessive force against 3 compliant individuals. And because we have an unreasonable use of force, this allows Pretti to step in between both the officer and the victim here.
That's where I also disagree with him. The unreasonable use of force does not allow a third party to get involved. The unreasonable use of force from his own, legal pages that he was going through allows the person to resist, to struggle and attempt to flee or however you want to describe it. It doesn't allow a third party, because if you think about it, you could have roving bands then of people thinking that something is unjust, just get involved and just swarm officers, and it would be absolute anarchy. There's no way that would take into effect. If I'm wrong, let me know. Let me know if I'm wrong. Drop it in the comments if you want. Or I would love to be educated on this. Again, I'm not a lawyer, But from the way I'm viewing this does not allow third parties to get involved in this particular situation.
Here to prevent more unreasonable force. Then, because the officer is being prevented from using unreasonable force, then escalates and uses a higher level on the force continuum, pepper spray, by pepper spraying everyone, the people on the ground and Mr. Pretti. Now, there is absolutely no resistance coming from the subjects here. All of the aggression, all of the force is coming from one direction, the officers to the witnesses, who have complied fully. They are now on the sidewalk, they are not in the street, and again, they have not violated federal law. So now everything up to this point has been unlawful by the officers. And if everything is unlawful, then the officers have committed assault against these three citizens. And this removes any justification for this type of use of force in this scenario. Now, as you can see, Pretti is being pushed over by the officer, the woman who's on the ground, who's been also pepper sprayed, and we have the woman in the brown jacket who's also been pepper sprayed. They're not assaulting the officer, they're not in the street, they're not blocking the officer.
All right, so we can see basically where he's going here, right? So essentially what he's the groundwork that he's laying down is that essentially everything up until the point of discharging of the firearms that we'll get to in a second was unlawful. It was a breaking of the law. Let's go ahead and take a look. Let's go a little bit further.
After the officer has yelled gun, 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 then the officer retrieves the sidearm, and as you can see, he's turned and moving away. Let's see.
Basically, what I want to get to his final point. His final point, which is it's a good final point. It is a fair final point. His final point was essentially that they get Pretti down to the ground. One officer sees the firearm. He yells gun, gun, gun. One officer retrieves the firearm. A shot goes off, which again, at this point, we don't know where that initial shot came from. That's going to be very, very important. He essentially says that that person that fired that first shot into Pretti, depending upon how the layout went down, may not be responsible for the death because they're hearing a shot, they're hearing gun, they're hearing all these things going on, and the officers that have fired the other shots, they reasonably believe that their lives were in danger and this was a threat that was coming from. Okay, that's where he stands. So essentially, what he's doing is he's condemning the initial cop and stating that there is definitely a lot of wiggle room in saying that the other cops reasonably believed that their lives were in danger. Therefore, they acted with deadly physical force because of the threat that they saw. Now, so again, he doesn't go full bore. He kind of says this initial cop was doing X, unlawful. He should be arrested. Is basically what he's saying. He's saying that initial cop should be arrested. And we don't know who again, because these things are very complicated. We don't know where the kill shot came from. All of these things. You know, what if the guy that shot first shot him in the leg, and then subsequently, then the fourth guy that shot him in the head or shot him in the heart or whatever, and that was a death. These things are a lot more complicated than people are led to believe. These investigations take a lot of time, take a lot of resources. You have to go through this stuff painstakingly to figure out what the hell happened, because even us in this isn't even 2020 hindsight. We are taking this frame by frame by frame, looking at each individual angle. That's not what these guys had. These guys had, I mean, literally, your face is in front of the everything that's going on, to the point where you can't even see what else is going on, what else is happening. So that's his contention. Now, this is what I bring to you guys. So let me just pull this up here. This just came out today from my understanding. You center a little bit. So here's what we have. Bigger. Whatever, it's fine like that. So this just came out a little bit. Take a look at it, see what you guys think, and we'll break it down.
This is a moment the news movement filmed on January 13th in Minneapolis, showing a man who appears to be Alex Pretti interacting with federal immigration agents 11 days before Border Patrol shot and killed him. Our footage was analyzed by the BBC, whose facial recognition technology confirmed his identity to a 97% degree of accuracy.
So, what do we have there? I'm going to let it play, but now this is, he said about a week prior, same individual. So now let's take this, because what is this? This is called context. This is called investigative steps. You have to figure all this stuff out. This is not cut and dry. This is very messy. Law enforcement is messy.
On the morning of January 13th, our team received a tip that federal agents were blocking a street at the corner of East 36 and Park Avenue in Minneapolis. We arrived around 10:15 a.m. We saw observers shouting at the agents as they walked back to their vehicles. When they started driving away, the man kicked their taillight. An agent then got out of the vehicle, grabbed him, and pushed him to the ground. Light. An agent then got out of the vehicle, grabbed him, and pushed him to the ground. During the altercation, agents fired tear gas and pepper balls into the crowd. They continued to hold the man down before they retreat, and he walks away. The man in our footage is wearing a similar outfit to what Pretti was wearing on the day he was killed. What appears to be a gun is also visible above his waistband.
You could see the firearm. It was pretty clear. But again, I'm gonna let this play on. They're gonna bring it back. I want everyone to see it. Crystal clear. Take a look.
Here, he continues to stand at the scene.
You can see him off there to the left-hand side.
On the day he was killed, the Department of Homeland Security claims Pretti, a 37-year-old ICU nurse, approached officers holding a handgun.
A lot of mistakes made on this, by the way, too. On the law enforcement side, on the upper echelon side, a lot of mistakes being made. Very sloppy with what they said, with what they put out. I mean, it's very frustrating because this stuff, it can be a lot neater, and when it's neater and when it's efficient, and when you have people that know exactly what they're doing and have been dealing with law enforcement things, like that's why I know, like Tom Homan, he sounds like he's got like marbles in his mouth, but he knows this stuff. He's been doing it. And some of the people that are in the spotlight when it comes to making statements on behalf of these guys, they may not be the best. You may need somebody else that really knows the nitty-gritty of law enforcement and how things work.
That claim has been contradicted by analysis of bystander videos from multiple news investigations, which concluded that Pretti was holding a phone, not a gun, when he was pinned to the street.
I think they go. I don't know if it goes back. So just take a look again.
In 8
right
Park
here,
Avenue in Minneapolis.
You can
We
see
arrived around 10:15 a.m. We saw observers shouting at
You can see here he's shouting. There you go, right there, right there, right there. What has he just done? What has he just done? I can tell you what he just did. Alex just committed a federal crime. He just committed a federal crime right there. However you feel about it, whatever you think about it, doesn't matter. He committed a federal crime. There's no way that anyone could say that his attempted arrest was unlawful. There's no way that anyone can say, how do we know those girls weren't there? How do we know that those other females were not present during this? Most likely they were. Did they partake in that? Did they commit crimes in the past? All we know is, as of now, he's committed a crime. Now, the question is then, well, why didn't they arrest him? That doesn't look like an arrest team, if you know anything about law enforcement. When you're suited up like that, you're not in the position to start taking bodies out of the street. You're not in the position to start handcuffing people, putting them. They're not going to a jail, right? He committed a federal crime. Great. We're gonna ID him. We're gonna make note of him. And somebody else, another unit, whether they're an investigative unit, whether we pawn it off to the locals, whoever, somebody else is going to deal with affecting that arrest, because they are a tactical unit that's not equipped for taking anyone except for their particular target. And that's where people like get really in the weeds and they don't understand the particulars of law enforcement. It's not that they shouldn't talk about it. They're allowed to have an opinion. However, I can go back and I can correct what they're saying. So in the end, I get Nate. You know, he gives a really good breakdown. However, especially with this video here, this guy was wanted. Whether there was a report open or whatever, because I'm sure when you go back to the base, you're going to have to explain why your taillight is out, and you're going to have to put all this, that the information has to be put down on record. You can't just walk in with a busted taillight. Now, maybe they didn't have the person identified. Maybe they didn't know who he was. That's fair. This video clears that up. And maybe one of the agents that was there was also present during that time. He saw that guy, and they were going to effect an arrest on him. All I'm saying is that just one video does not a case make. There is always more evidence, more witnesses, more to be seen, more to be heard, more to do. And, you know, I would just hope that in the end, you know, we just got to have a good investigation. The truth has to come out, and, you know, whatever the case is, it is. I'm fine with that. I have no issue with that. What I would say is this. What I would say in that particular situation, unless one of those agents knew that he was wanted or whatever, I'm going to say that the very first person that took the shot, if they can't articulate that they saw a threat, why did they shoot? If it was an AD, if it was accidental discharge, then everyone's kind of indemnified, in my opinion. Because at that point, you hear gun, 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 you hear shot, boom. Now, even still, a lot of the training that I've seen, they're very specific in that even when your gun is out, even when your gun is drawn, you see the threat, right? Unless you identify a deadly physical threat, right, you're still not finger on the trigger. And even if you hear shots, if you can identify where that shot is coming from, you're not just throwing lead down range, especially in an urban environment. You need to see where the shots are coming from. You need to know maybe that's a friendly. That could be my partner. That could be somebody else that's out there that sees something that I don't see. And if I don't see it, I'm not throwing lead down the range. You can train for it all you want. It doesn't always work. It's very messy. But in this particular situation, again, if the person that shot the first shot can't articulate seeing a threat, then they're liable. It sucks. It sucks. But you can't do that. You can't shoot without seeing a threat. Doesn't matter if someone says gun, gun, gun. Everything's very heightened. Pepper spray's in the air. The pepper spray goes everywhere, guys. It doesn't just go on the people that you're spraying it on, right? The wind's going to whip that up. Those guys, all those guys you see on the screen right there, there's pepper spray in there, in their eyes, in their nose, in their mouth. Their adrenaline's kicked up. They're effecting an arrest. They got people screaming at them. Guy says gun, gun, gun. And then pop. What do you do? And I laid it out. That took me 15 seconds to just describe it. That happened in 2 seconds. 3 seconds, maybe 5. It is tough, man. It is tough. But when you're using deadly physical force with great power, that's all I can say. There's a massive amount of responsibility that comes when you wield that. And if you took a shot and you didn't see a threat, you got to be held accountable. Whatever that means, whether it's prosecution, whether it's getting fired, that's for everybody else to decide. That's for their thing to decide. For their job, for the state, for the feds, whatever. But guys, if you're still here with me, thank you so much. This has been the longest video I did because I thought it was pretty important, and I had a lot to say on it. If you want to follow me on the X, 6283talk is me on the X, and that's it. Subscribe, share, please comment. Like, I really want to know what people think. Like I said, I have experience in this realm. I can't get into that just yet. I will down the road. But yeah, let's talk about it. Let's hear what everyone else has to say. Thank you guys so much for all the support and all the new followers and all the new everybody. I'm John Soto. See you in the next video. Take care, guys.